I'm going to create a release now, and this is going to be a DVD release. We could cheat and go back to the project assistant and select CD-ROM and build it from here. It would define everything for us, but we want to define a DVD release because CD-ROMs aren't used as much for applications anymore since the requirements have gotten bigger, generally DVDs. But this time when we define the release, we're going to compress the application files and they'll be placed in cabinet files. So I'm going to bring up the release wizard. We don't have a product configuration yet, so I'll make one. The release name will be DVD. We don't need to do anything on filtering settings or setup languages. In the media type, let's select DVD 5. That's a 4.38 gig DVD. For disk spanning options, we want to use automatic. We need to let InstallShield manage disk spanning if we have more than will fit on one disk. Now, before we left files uncompressed and separate from the installation package, but this time I'm going to compress all files, and it says a network image will consist of a single MSI or setup.exe file. For all other media types, the program files will be compressed into cab files that are separate from the MSI or setup.exe file. It'll have a setup launcher by default. We don't need to put a signature, use a password or copyright, .NET. We don't need advanced settings. Now we can build it. Now let's open the release folder. See, all our files have been compressed into cabinet files because all the ones we have here are basically pertaining to the setup. There are no application files loose in this folder. Now if I went back to the release wizard and said leave files uncompressed and separate and rebuilt it, we see now that we have an application folder with our application files loose in it. That's the difference in the options. So I'll go back and select compress all files. This time I won't rebuild it. I have some more changes I want to make. Let's go to the setup.exe tab, and I'm going to change the required execution level to be administrator. You usually always need administrator privileges. And this is an administrator installation. Now we can rebuild it. And at this point we have the beginnings of the MegaView installation. We want to look at modifying the script. Now there are no event handlers, so we're going to add some, and there are two ways to do this. You can either create the event handler yourself, or you can let InstallShield create it for you. And we will let InstallShield create the event handler, so we will place the cursor at the point in the script where we want the event handler to be added. Then we go to the top of the script and select the handlers from the drop-down list. So I'll select on begin, on first UI before. I'll do after move data, on first UI after. Before move data, on main UI before. And then finally, after move data, on main UI before, or excuse me, on main UI after. Now I'm going to add some white space because that's what I like to do. Now InstallShield has placed default code in each of the event handlers that we added, and this is the same code that will be executed behind the scenes if the event handler is not in the script. I'll remind you that if you don't want the default code that InstallShield placed in these handlers, you can just delete it. But know this, if the event handler is present in the script, you are responsible for it. If it's not present in the script, InstallShield will be responsible for it and will execute only the statements that you see in the default event handler. When we add a handler, we can modify the script as we see fit. And I'll demonstrate what I just told you. Here's onFirstUI_After. And what I can do is delete the code in here. Let's build the installation. Now I'll run it. And this is installing on my development machine, but I want to make a point. Watch what happens after the file transfer takes place. The installation just ends. Why is that? Well, onFirstUI_After is called after the file transfer has taken place, and we deleted all the code. See, we added the event handler to our script, and now we're responsible for it. So if we delete all the code and don't put anything, that's why you don't get a finish dialog saying the installation has completed successfully. And I just did this to prove a point. So I'm going to go uninstall MegaView. Now, if I take this out totally and rebuild it and install it again, we'll have a different outcome because I took the entire event handler out. I didn't just remove the statements in it. And now here's our finish dialog. And the reason is, since we took the entire handler out of our script, InstallShield became responsible for it, and it used the default code, which includes a finish dialog. Let's uninstall MegaView once again. Now I'm going to add the onFirstUI_After event handler back in, but it puts it at the bottom of the script, so I'm going to move it because I like these logically arranged. Oh, I've got that deal where this is a strange deal that occurs in InstallShield once in a while. You won't be able to copy and paste. So what I'm going to do is exit out of InstallShield and come back in. Now let's go back into InstallShield. I'll go to the InstallScript view. After move data, I'll add the handler again on onFirstUI_After. Now I'll copy it, cut, paste. This is a bug that I've noticed in InstallShield for several versions, and I may be the only one who run into it. I don't know. Now I'm going to rebuild. And we now have a working installer once again. You'll notice here in OnFirstUI before, we have some variable declarations. Number, remember, is an integer. String is a string. Bool is a Boolean. Remember, I pointed out in the earlier slides that in InstallScript, the logical equal is a single equal. So don't put a double in. For some reason, they didn't use a double equal sign. All the other operators match the C versions, like here is not equal. Remember on the dialogues, when you have a dialogue call, one of these SD dialogues or one of the InstallShield built-in dialogues, you always want to look at the result that's returned, and here's how you check to see if the result is back. That's how you tell if the user wants to go back or he pushed the back button in the dialog. Remember on SQL login, we don't have any SQL scripts in our installation, but this is called to check, so it just falls through if there are none. These are go-to statements, perfectly legitimate in InstallScript because that's how you get back and forth between points in the code. Perfectly legitimate. Here in the SD-ask-deskPath call, this is if the user chooses the custom setup type, he ends up here, and it's being passed installdir, which is the value set in the general information view, but the user has the ability to change the destination path, and that value is also stored in installdir. So installdir can change when you set it up this way. Now this is a good point to start making changes to the script. The first change we'll make is to show how to add a background for the installation because some people like that. I prefer not to use one, but it's just personal preference. You know, adding a background is easy to do. I'll put it here. All this does is set the color of the background to be solid black, and then we enable the background by passing the background parameter to enable. Let's build this and I'll demonstrate it real quick. Okay, you can see here that we have a black background. That's all we're going to do is get out. I just wanted to show you that. Now you can also display a bitmap on the background. And I'm going to go to the support files, language independent folder, and I'm going to place a bitmap in here. Here's earth.bmp. It's in the project files under MegaView 1.0. Now I'll go back to the script. Okay, now this is declaring a path here. Really, it's probably, I like it a little better if it's up there with the other variable declarations. So this sets the black background, but this enables the Earth bitmap to be full window mode. This sets the path to be the support files folder. When the installation runs, it copies what's in support files to a temporary folder, and that's what the value is for supportdir, the path to the temporary folder. So we know the Earth bitmap is there. We make the path, and we call the function. Center it, and put it full screen. Let's rebuild this and see how that works. Okay, I'll move this over. You're only going to be able to see this part here, but it is in the center of my monitor. Let's cancel out. What you need to remember is that if you want to display a bitmap, you have to enable the background first. That's why we left this call in here. If you just have the place bitmap statement, nothing's going to show up. So let's comment out this code. I'm going to leave it in for you so you can refer back to it. Now let's go to the string table. InstallShield has a string table, and it operates in a similar fashion to Visual Studio. In Visual Studio, it's resources. But in InstallShield, you want to place your text strings into the string table instead of hard coding them in your script. It's just a good practice. So here in the string editor, we only have one table here now, and that is the English table, because our only language that this installation runs in is English. And as I said earlier, if you have the InstallShield Premier Edition and your installation targets more than one language, there's going to be a string table for each language that you can edit separately. Now we need to check the feature names here. Here it is right here. I'm going to rename these instead of the name InstallShield or the identifier InstallShield assigned to it. It's more readable this way. That's the first one. Let's do text. View text. Let's go back and see if this is showing up. IDS feature required elements. IDS feature display name. Okay, I changed the wrong one. There we go. IDS feature text, that's fine. View databases, IDS feature display name 2. Then view profile as IDS feature display name 3. And view HTML. Let's check. Required elements, IDS required elements, IDS feature text, IDS feature database, IDS feature profile, IDS feature HTML. That's good. And you notice that when we change the strings in the string table, the identifier associated with the string is this, so the string changes too. Or in the feature display, it changes here too because it's based on an entry in the string table. And you can change it either place and it will affect the other. For example, I could have clicked the ellipsis button here and changed the string here in this editor. Let's go back to the string editor. I'm going to get rid of this stuff. And you can do finds or searches on strings here. To search for a string, all we need to do is input part of the text in there. For example, using the examples we did before, let's put view in the search box, and it filters out everything else except those strings that have view in them. So that's a very convenient feature to use to get through all these strings and find the one you want to modify, because there's pages and pages of these things. At this point, we need to create the MegaView INI, MegaView XML, and the registry entries. And we want to do this after the data has been transferred, so we will do it in the onFirstUI after event. I'm going to go back to the script and go to the onFirstUI after event. You'll notice here that in the middle pane, we have the script files in the project, and then For a given script file, when it's selected, it will show you all the functions in that script file. And what's neat about this is you can select the name of one of the functions and it'll take you there, so you don't have to page through the code. Here's on main UI after. Now I'm going to go into this event handler and delete the default code.